What's up, guys? How are we? What's going on, Hassan? Kelechi? How's it going? Just give me a minute to set things up. Can you guys see me all right? Can you hear me all right? What's up, Al Ghul? Morin? Yeah, got the webcam working in the end. It was quite a task, but we got there. Give me 1 sec just to get this up. All right, cool. So you can hear, can see, all good? Appreciating these comments, Argul. Keep them coming. I'll give you a lifetime free sub in my group if you keep it up. Okay, so we're gonna do a market review, top down, and yeah, get into the charts today. There's a lot to cover, so let's run through it all. Before we do, I want to wrap up some trades that I've closed recently, just for full disclosure, to have some carry on from the last streams, just so you can see as and where I close my positions. Give me 1 sec. So out of ADA, those that have watched previous streams will remember that I was short from a 5-minute divergence off the back of the Trump announcement, and I'd never normally go down to the 5-minute. It was a rare exception, based on the fact that we had a near 80% move in a day. Right, 85% on the day, and heavily news-based, right? So if you guys want to see my execution in finer detail, please refer back to a stream probably 4 or so streams ago. TP'd some here, I think it was a 20% TP, and then closed the rest on this reclaim down here. So yeah, fully out of ADA, held that for give or take, I mean, I closed it here, so 41 days, a fair swing position. And then the ton position as well, we ran through, I believe, the stream before last. Closed this one as well, right? So first TP was automatic, in terms of a limit bid that was placed at the low down here, 20%, and then the full remainder here again. Similar style to ADA, but again, if you guys want to refer to the execution of any of these trades, please go back to previous streams that I've done, and you can see them in proper clarity. So that being said, let's crack on with BTC. We'll go proper top-down style, considering the monthly close yesterday as well. Okay. So at face value, absolutely nothing bearish about BTC here. We front run the monthly demand, intra-demand pocket in here. You can see it was completely front run. If we take it from this wick up here, even still, front run. So yeah, I mean, this was, everyone wanted this, right? Everyone wanted this clean retest, down to the top of the zone here, and in classic form, it came a fraction off, and then moved from there, right? So The RSI is now not overextended as well. You can see that previously it was, right? So up here, past the 70 regions. Now it's come down, somewhat of a cool off. I wouldn't call it a technical reset as we haven't moved down to the 55 level. That being said, it has cooled off and there is room for more upside now on the oscillators. That's pretty much it from the monthly, right? Apart from this bullish looking monthly close candle yesterday. Weekly, we are into a trouble area here. Right, we're into weekly supply. If BTC fails, it's likely to do so in this area. Going down to the daily. And as I'm sure many of you saw, heavily posted across Twitter, this diagonal break here, which really has come into effect and catapulted BTC nicely higher. What I didn't see on Twitter very much was something very critical in terms of a potential reversal for BTC here. And that was that, yes, we broke through that diagonal trend line. That was capping price action from the start of the year. But we also formed this pocket of intra-demand here, right? So if we come down to the 12-hour time frame, we can see that we still have a double divergence across the RSI and the awesome oscillator, okay? So lower highs. As price makes higher highs. Now, this is the only divergence that is still really valid. What I mean by that is that if you go to, I believe it was the 4, 6, and the 8, we had valid divergences across all of those time frames, as you can see here. On the 4-hour, 6-hour, again, similar story. And 8-hour. So all, and even the 10-hour, right? So it was just even increments up to the 12-hour, basically. There were valid divergences. And you can see by looking at the 4-hour time frame, all that happened in this area for BTC, whilst there was this potential divergence, was a move back down to the 50 level, resetting the RSI, and then moving higher. So if we go to the 6, again, you can see pretty much an exact tap to that 50 level there. And the only one that's still standing, right, holding on for dear life, is the 12-hour. So we need to see how this is resolved, right? Where the resolution of this divergence is still very much pending. That being said, if we get any play out, and I say if seriously, because you know the fact that the 4, 6, 8, and 10-hour time frames were heavily diverging in this area. Clean technical double divergences across both the oscillators, and all price was able to do was grind sideways, is a very bullish sign for BTC here. It gives much more credence to the daily trendline break and all the other narratives. You know, the easily posted bullish narratives you're probably seeing across CT. But in terms of the 12-hour time frame, still pending resolution. So whether we do get some impetus to the downside here and take out this low here, or perhaps move down here and come even lower. And I say if again, as BTC does look very strong in this area. And as I said, completely negated all of those time frame divergences. But if, then we do have this buffer zone, right? And if we go to the daily, we can see it nice and clean. Impulse, cluster, impulse. It's pretty clean in terms of higher time frame intra-demand. Ideally wouldn't see this back and forth price action before. But that being said, it's still substantial, right? It's still substantial, still carries weight, and if we get some play out from the 12-hour divergence, I imagine price holds up in this area, okay? Which is great, right? It's a very good look for BTC at the moment. In addition to that, we've just come and reclaimed this level here. So if we get rid of this and map out something like this, we're back into the previous range, right? Back to the 96s, back in the previous range. And yeah, it's basically just a game of whether the 12-hour plays out here or not, right? But BTC at the moment, looking strong, looking healthy. Delta-wise, we, again, you know, we had this huge spike of positive delta here. So if we scroll back, and for those that aren't familiar with what delta is, essentially what this means is there was a lot of market buying in the market, but that market buying occurred into limit asks. Limit being the stronger hand in the market, the big players in the market, the institutional organizations, etc., that really pivot the market, do not operate in market form, right? They can't bite that slippage on their positions, so they operate in limit format. So the delta tells us really where the stronger hand is stepping into the market, and yeah, you can see that we had a huge spike of positive delta here. If we scroll back, yeah, we really haven't seen anything of this size since December, right? And if you count this one here, 20th of Jan. So heavily significant. If you see the aggregated liquidations as well as confluence, you can see that we have that in very good measure here as well. But again, as with the 4, 6, 8, and 10-hour divergences, price didn't do anything, right? There was no downside. There was no drawdown on price, and really for price to span, 8 days here without seeing any effect of this delta, again, is a very, very strong sign for BTC. And then, no play out here, grind sideways, and then start putting in negative delta. So again, I've very much been hunting shorts on the alt side of things for some time, but if this carries on the way that it's going, then we may have to start flipping that, looking for longs, playing breakouts, marking out demand zones instead of supply, etc., etc. So yeah, all eyes on the 12-hour time frame for me at the moment. Let's see how this plays, and still keeping eyes on the delta here. At the moment, I put a post out earlier which said hourly breakout here versus the 12-hour divergence, and I also mentioned that 12-hour div is into 3-day supply. So you can see here. Again, remember the daily intra demand we were just pointing out. Flip reverse it, very similar structure. We're into the 3-day supply zone, intra supply zone here. So, yeah, if we breach this level, then there's nothing really stopping us, to be honest. Like I said, you know, this area here is technically weekly supply. Within that, we've got 3 days supply. So I imagine if the weekly supply is to take effect, then it will probably occur within this zone of essentially double confluence here. But generally speaking, the 3-day picture is a very interesting time frame to look at. You can see that we had a bullish AO divergence at the lows as well. Here. So lower lows on price, just on the bodies, only just, but still there. And higher lows on the awesome oscillator. So yeah, been a very, very pivotal time frame, the 3-day at the moment. And I think that's pretty much it for BTC. Right, let's move on to ETH. Let's get rid of this. So top down again, monthly. Obviously looking at the monthly time frames, ETH versus BTC, there is a huge disparity between the two. ETH in a pretty shoddy spot here relative to BTC, right? BTC still very much in its own bull market at the moment, leading the pack, and Ethereum really holding on for dear life here, to be completely honest, especially given the bullish winds that have been blown into the market in terms of BTC. ETH looks pretty crap, to be frank. So not much to say on the monthly really there. The weekly again is relatively speaking in no man's land. So you can see that we're into, in terms of left side confluence, we're into an area of relative compression here. What compression means is essentially that as price marched upwards here, 2022 to 23, we basically tapped into any latent demand as it did so, right? So you can see in this area here, there was a touch of demand. We moved into demand, exhausted that, came down here, wicked back, did the same thing here, did the same thing here. And essentially what that means is we treat compression in the same way that we treat inefficiencies, fair value gaps, FVGs, whatever you want to call them. In that there's very much, you know, there's not very much in the way of supporting price, and there's nothing really technical we can work with in terms of demand in this area. So ETH hovering pretty much in no man's land. If we zoom down to the daily, we can see that it's, you know, market structure wise looking poor, and there's one key level in terms of it being sort of a line in the sand for ETH at the moment, which is here, right? And you can see the interactions even further to the left, I believe, if we pull it. Yeah, here. So super clean SR here. We get a tap down to support, breakthrough, tap resistance, consolidation, breakout, hold, flip as support, again, tap, 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 break down, flip it to the underside as resistance, and you can see that it's just been a very, very pivotal level here, around these sort of 2150s on ETH. So really, there's no real bullish case for Ethereum until we get a reclaim, right? Until something like this occurs. There's no real bull case for ETH at the moment, okay? So yeah, have that level marked on your charts because it's very, very critical at the moment, and we'll see going down to the lower time frames. Again, we can see that, you know, BTC's been so much stronger than Ethereum in this area. And we may even have a local sweep on our hands here. Now, we know that BTC had 12-hour, 10-hour, 8-hour, 6-hour, and 4-hour divergences. ETH didn't, but that's not to say that ETH is more bullish. The reason ETH didn't is simply because it wasn't strong enough to get up to the overextended regions. So if we go over to, let's say 12-hour here, we can see that the AO, right, is technically diverging. So we have a nice divergence on the awesome oscillator, which is giving us good clues about price's intention. That being said, the RSI literally couldn't get up there, right? So, where with BTC, it was a nice divergence as it's up in the 12-hour region, up in the overextended region for the 12-hour. ETH just couldn't even get up there, right? And now we have this sort of triple drive pattern forming on Ethereum as well. So yeah, not the best look for ETH at the moment. Difficult to position into because, as per my system anyway, I'm looking for double divergences to action. And as this is a single divergence, i.e. it's only present on the AO, not the RSI, it's harder to action. Even going down to the lower time frames at the moment, you can see that there's no real double divergence here. Even the 30-minute, which would be the lowest viable time frame that I could action. It's just not there at the moment. If this was more of a structure that happened like so, then perhaps. But the fact that the RSI came back to the 50 level means it's not a trade for me. And for those that are new here, I'm very, very happy to skip positions when my system tells me that I can't enter them. This is what I use for my system. If we go into here, you can see that this is my trading system, right? And I tweak it as time progresses, but recently haven't been doing so because I'm really very happy with where it's at. And for instance, if I was thinking about taking the Ethereum trade, let's say on the 30-minute time frame, then I'd get stopped out. It's a process that I call gatekeeping this. I'd be stopped from taking the position because I have two systems, regular breakout. This is very much in the regular system. Is the trade based off a sweep, supply or demand, or a deviation? Yes, it's a sweep. So we progress to the next stage. If a sweep deviation play, are you operating at either the absolute final high low or at least a high low that is independent enough from others it could stretch for? Yep, happy with that here. Looking at the hourly anyway. And then do you have a well-structured double divergence across the RSI and the AO? No, I don't. So this gate has kept you out, can't take the trade. And I'm very happy to abide by that system, even if this plays, because I know that the system has been stress tested over long scale, and that even if this is a play out here in terms of impetus to the downside without a double divergence present, it's a 1 out of 10 occurrence, right? So I'm happy to stack the probabilities in my favor, stick to my systematic process, and sit on my hands for now, essentially. Okay, cool. So Solana, let's take a look. Probably the most interesting monthly chart out there, to be completely honest. This monthly SFP candle as of yesterday is looking very tasty. You couple that with the exact reset that we've got here on the RSI, and Solana from a technical standpoint, from a purely a charting standpoint, looks like one of the most interesting markets out. That being said, take everything that I say in terms of any altcoin with a massive bucket of salt, because BTC is really leading the pack here in a bull market of its own, and we'll move on to the totals, the dominance charts, etc. later to get a more holistic view of what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's been a very, very novel cycle, quote unquote, this time, in that, you know, as we all know, BTC has moved independently from the rest of the market, really. A decoupling that none of us saw coming, and even fewer of us wanted to happen. So yeah, monthly looking good with the SFP and the reset here. So let's scope down to the daily. For me on Sol, eyes are on this high here. So I got alert set here. Right, and looking to see the reaction here. Whether we move up, we hold past this level and then march onwards, or whether we take it out. That sort of 180 level is a key liquidity point in my eyes. So yeah, we'll see what occurs when if price reaches that level. One thing that has been very interesting with Solana as of late is the delta, and I only use Sol 4-hour delta, aggregated delta, because the 1 hour gets a bit choppy in terms of the signals it gives. But you can see that the positive delta that's been taking place has been really, really effective and really pivotal, even going back to sort of here. Cluster of positive delta here, downtrend. Huge cluster of positive delta here, marked the highs. Again, positive delta here, slammed price back down, and it's happened like clockwork every time. And you can see that now that we're in this area, albeit not nearly as significant or large as the other delta spikes, still a standout positive delta candle in this region, or delta candle period. And you can see that really there's been no impetus to the downside here, right? There's been no play out in terms of this positive delta, and when we start to pay attention to the delta dynamics in this case, you know, we're not just talking about actioning trades based off, you know, longs based off negative or shorts based off positive. We're reading further into the delta, understanding the nuances that are taking place, comparing it to, you know, relative candles in history, and saying, okay, what does this mean, right? The fact that there was lots of market buying into heavy limit asks on Solana, which normally the heavier hand has been shaping this market, right? Like no tomorrow. And here wasn't able to do so. Again, Solana, very interesting. You know, not exempt from what I said about altcoins being at the whim of BTC, but interesting nonetheless. Right, I want to look at a few other alts. Let's take a look at Hype. So I put a tweet out earlier today. Interesting position here for Hype. Okay, I know it was a coin that attracted a huge amount of mindshare previously. Got somewhat forgotten about with the goldfish memory of CT. But now looking very spicy, in that we had this previous range that had formed as price broke down from this trend line here, we stalled at the base of the range lows naturally, and in doing so formed a cluster of origin supply, impulse cluster, impulse. And you can see that essentially at this sort of period here, my bias on hype was naturally bearish because we're back into resistance. We're into a cluster of intra supply. And the trend is generally speaking down. But what's happened has been relatively surprising, in that, you know, essentially with this price action here, we've cut through and invalidated that supply zone. A pretty clean reclaim of this range low as well, right? So we need to see how this develops, but generally speaking, looking pretty healthy. And we even have the help of the, you know, our trusty old friend, the resets again here. And resets, generally speaking, are good, right? They're very good momentum resetters. They help push price forward or downwards, vice versa. But when we get exact resets like this, where it literally taps to the 50 level, then it gets much more technical, right? And we can place more weight on these resets. So 12-hour exactly to the 50 level. Move down to the 4-hour, we can see that again here. Okay, so we've got this sort of fractal reset occurring, which makes hype a very interesting market to look at. Essentially what we're wanting to see here is that range low to hold, start progressing towards the mid EQ, and then start challenging the highs perhaps. Again, BTC pending. But yeah, eyes on hype, a very interesting market indeed. All right, FARTCOIN. One day it's going to be ridiculous to say that ticker. It still feels fairly normal. Somehow we get normalized into crazy things in this space. So very little in the way of RSI data here on the weekly, but you can see that even still there is a reset here. Okay, we can't discredit it just because it only, you know, the RSI only started printing its positions at this point in the chart here at the end of January. There is still a weekly reset that took place at the lows here. Daily looking fairly strong, to be completely honest. I think the most important level on the charts is here. So a very nice reclaim here of the 0.75s, and held nicely, right? Held its weight nicely, and just marching onwards here. The only potential point of concern would be this divergence here. We have a flat top div on the daily. Again, it is a double divergence as we have that AO confluence. But that being said, it's not the strongest signal. Reason being, firstly, the RSI isn't overextended, right? We want to see both peaks in the overextended region past the 70 level here. Secondly, it's flat topped, right? We ideally want to see more of a sharp and severe divergence against price. And anyway, that's just speaking on the daily time frame. The 12-hour is interesting, right? Paints an interesting picture here because we have this sort of triple hump structure on the AO. But that being said, it's been occurring since the reclaim of the 75s and still hasn't been able to push price lower. So we'll see if that resolves itself or not. In uptrends, right, it's very common to see these diverging structures with little play out. But it's also one of those things which can just take place at any minute, and just completely reverse the momentum of price. Even if it gets super prolonged and overstretched, right, it does something like this, it can still play out even when you think it's dead. A good example is actually just here. right? This sort of drifting, dull AO divergence here against price, which actually technically marked the bottom into this cluster here. So yeah, it's a challenging one to work with. Okay, Ripple, everyone's favorite market. Jesus, man. It just looks silly, doesn't it? Okay, so monthly, I mean, what really is there to say? Bullish pin bar, right? Closed yesterday. Taking out this low here. So monthly SFP, local. And I think the most significant thing about XRP is the fact that it's managed to squeeze its way down from the ghastly oversold 85s on the monthly, which is pretty much unheard of, down to a much more reasonable 65 here, giving it much more room if it decides to go on a mad one again. Weekly, again, you can see there's a common theme in this stream focusing on resets. We have an exact reset on the weekly here, and you can see that SFP in a bit more clarity on the weekly time frame. Not much to add on the daily apart from the fact that XRP tapped into and did not front run its daily demand here. Okay, so just tapped into that intra demand zone on the daily, swept this low, so really nice confluence for a position. You've got higher time frame. We know that the higher time frames produce much more valid signals. We have a sweep and we have a demand zone here, right? So a very technical and solid foundation and footing for XRP in this area. And I believe if the market starts rallying to the upside, this is definitely one to keep an eye on. One of the strongest markets, and I expect it to continue doing so. That being said, I've run through some particularly appetizing markets, and if you run through any of the other ones, they all look like this. Okay. So, slammed, slammed, slammed. Right, something like algo, looking at the weekly. It's pretty much all-time lows, right? And this is what the majority of the market looks like. So, yes, I've run through some coins, hype, XRP, etc., that look fairly bullish. Do not take that as a general representation for the rest of the market, because that is absolutely not the case. You can see these weeklies here. Okay, some in negative price discovery. So yeah, those that are screaming alt season on Twitter, just tell them to scope over to the weekly and just flick through their watch list. And I bet you it will shut them up pretty quickly. Let's ignore BNB in that in that argument. Okay, cool. So dominance, we can have a quick look at dominance as well. Talking of alt season. So again, these notes are unchanged. They're from a stream I did a few months ago. Essentially just looking at the post-halving effect on BTC and altcoins. And you can see that we're in basically uncharted waters here, because the 2016 halving occurred here, 33 weeks later, alt season, and that spanned for 45 weeks. Again, like clockwork, halving in 2020, 33 weeks later, we had that significant drop in dominance. And again, an alt season that lasted, give or take, 45 weeks, and essentially this was all I was going off, looking at Bitcoin dominance. It was all, you know, in my opinion, the only thing, you know, I hadn't noticed anyone talk about these fractals, but it was all I had to go off, right? All we can go off in terms of dominance is past history. And, you know, yes, I was positioning into altcoins. Yes, I got wrecked on the spot side. And, you know, it's difficult. We're in unprecedented territory here whereby history hasn't repeated itself. Bitcoin's gone on an absolute rampage. You know, like I covered, ETH on the higher time frames looks trash. You know, scoping through those altcoins we did just a minute ago on the weeklies, looking trash as well. Dominance still raging upwards, and until we see any significant impetus to the downside on dominance, I expect it to continue the way that it's going, right? Favor the trend until you don't. And unless we get a significant breakdown of this level here on this trend line, which again is a heavily subjective thing, right? Don't place too much credence on this, because you could have said it from here, okay? And I was seeing a lot of these charts on Twitter, whereby at this point here, you know, if you think you're seeing a lot of you know, calls for alt season these days, this was crazy, right? There was just everyone posting this, talking about, you know, the Bitcoin dominance toppling over, catalyzing alt season, etc., etc. And you can see the play out and what's occurred since. Okay, so really not much to comment on the dominant side of things, apart from this time it is different, essentially. Total 2 looks more decent than the rest. Okay, it looks more decent than the rest. From a technical charting standpoint, we're into this MSDZ market structure defense zone here, and we still have technically bullish market structure, right? Whether we see this is anyone's guess. ETH BTC, just massively a falling knife, right? Not much more to say on ETH BTC, apart from the fact, if you do want some hopium blown into your pipes, the RSI hasn't been this low on the weekly since here, so 6 years ago. But yeah, I'll leave on that fairly optimistic note, so we don't get too dark and too bleak about it. Anyway, that's it for the market review today. Do you guys have any questions for me? Angelo, if you were to position in this area, how would you, or would you even position it at all? Yeah, I've been sitting on my hands, largely speaking, at the moment. I'm waiting for BTC to resolve itself, especially with this 12-hour divergence situation that we have at hand. Essentially, you know, if we look at the 12-hour or look at the 4-hour, we're at a point of potential pivot in the markets, right? So this here is a potential pivot in the markets, this area here. And as per my system, and I'm going to assume most people's systems, they favor more directional markets, where you have some sort of grasp on whether to favor longs or shorts, at least, play into the trend. And at this point of relative indecision in the markets, my best advice to you all is to sit on your hands, practice patience, focus on discipline, focus on emotional journaling, sharpen your edge in terms of learning new TA styles, reflecting through your journals, do some higher time frame reviews of your journals, put together a wall of fame most people, any student of mine, before we start, I want them to put together a wall of fame, which is basically looking through the last year's worth of price action, give or take, plucking out the best 10, say, setups, compiling that into a book, or as I'm looking at over there, I've got them printed all over my wall behind my computer, just so you have a sort of visual playbook to reference, because I am a massive advocate of visual systems preferential over written systems, in that it's a visual game, right? Charting is a visual game, and it's very, very handy to have that. So if you don't have something like that to hand, yeah, get to work. There's tons of things you can get busy with in this area. Trading shouldn't be one of them until we get some sort of confirmed resolution. Alright, looking at FARTCOIN. Yeah, just for you, V. Alright, boys and girls, listen, I'm going to clock off. I've got a 3-month-old to attend to. Hope you guys enjoyed the stream. And I will see you all next week.